today's special episode of Alberta Impact, Future of Health. I'm your host, Bryce Lambert. Today we have joining us John Lewis and Arun Raturi from Entos Pharmaceutical and Reg Joseph from Health City to talk to us a little bit about kind of just all the craziness that's going on with the coronavirus and the isolation and kind of the progress, and to give us a little bit more clarity on the progress that's happening right now with developing a vaccine, a solution to this issue, and kind of just how the whole health system works when an episode like this happens and is presented to us as a whole. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I think I'm going to start today here with John. Can you tell us a little bit about what a coronavirus exactly is? Because I think some people might have the confusion that it's just one specific, but this is actually a strain, if I'm correct, of multiple viruses that are just renamed as the mutation happens. Can you give us a little bit more clarity on that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So coronaviruses obviously are a human pathogen, a virus that's called an enveloped virus. So it has a layer on the surface of it similar to a human cell, but they have all these spikes sticking out of it that sort of gives it its name. When you look at it under a microscopy, it looks like it has a corona around it. And so, as you're well aware, so viruses, they come from different classes. So coronavirus are a certain class of virus. Inside, they contain RNA, which is the building blocks of their lives. But their lives consist of infecting humans, typically in the upper respiratory tract, causing, in many cases, pretty innocuous disease with very few symptoms. Every once in a while, though, a version of them mutates, like SARS or MERS, and now COVID-19, to have much more serious effects. So maybe they get into the cells a bit better, maybe they divide a bit better, and multiply. And these can be, because they're transmitted relatively easily through human contact, through droplets, they can become very dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So now, how are the policies put into place now, and how is the steps put into place, I should say, on carrying out the research that you guys need to do on such a short notice when something like this arises? Nowadays with technology, and we move a lot more than we did back in the 18 and the 1900s. So right. These viruses spread fast, which is, the reason we're doing this self-isolation now, to kind of slow that curve and take it easy on the healthcare system, on the influx of people that are coming in. How are the policies in place for you guys to kind of get development happening to work towards a solution?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, we're in a completely new world, even compared to when SARS was a problem. The worldwide scientific community has just been fantastic, galvanized at creating new information about the virus, learning about the virus. We know the structure of the virus. We know the sequence of the viral genome, and with technologies and machine learning, for instance, we've been able to rapidly identify other drugs that are out there that are used for different diseases that could potentially be brought to bear on coronavirus. Entos Pharmaceuticals has a genetic medicine platform that we're using to tackle diseases like cancer and inflammatory diseases. And so the genetic medicine industry is ideally suited to address vaccines, and in particular COVID-19, in a way that's never been addressed before. Mm-hmm. Put it in the context of how vaccines have been developed in the past. Vaccines like the flu and others, they basically take pieces of the virus or the virus itself and inactivate it, and then give you a small dose of that inactive virus. And then your body builds up an immune response, and then you can survive an insult or an attack of that virus. But nowadays, with genetic medicines, we can basically create a code, a DNA code, that we insert into your body. Your body makes some of those proteins that the virus would make, but it's completely non-infectious, completely safe. But then your body mounts an immune response just like it would to an inactivated virus, and then would be protective against that virus if you were infected. And the great thing about that is once we know the sequence, we can manufacture these vaccines extremely quickly. So quickly, in fact, that the first companies now in the space are already testing this in phase 1 trials this week, which is fantastic.
Absolutely. So now what about rolling this out now? So you guys can do all of the studies, the tests, and kind of get the foundation put in place, but now we have to translate that over into actually implementation. How is that kind of implementation? And I might get, Reg Joseph from Health City to kind of hop in, because now we're going to get into the conversation about policies and protocol on getting stuff like this done in a speedy time. So I'll start with you, John, in regards to that. Where is the implementation come into play now, and how is that getting carried forward?
Yeah, so I mean, as your viewers well know, I mean, starting discovering a drug and then bringing it through clinical trials so it's available on the market to the public is quite a long process, and for vaccines can take typically from 5 to 7 years. In cases like COVID-19, we don't have that long. So, and people know that, and governments know that, and the regulatory agencies are well aware of that. And with genetic medicines, we can, within about a 6-week period, can go from identifying a virus to having a potential treatment for that. So I think it's really important that we, work with governments to be able to design pathways, regulatory pathways, where we can rapidly get these new treatments into patients, and if they work, then make them available to the public.
Awesome. And so now I'll jump over to Reg in regards to, we talk about getting everything in place to make this kind of stuff happen and roll out. Can you talk a little bit to that and some of the roadblocks that we might be having in the healthcare system right now that might be slowing some things down, or, are we getting better at that? Can you talk a little bit to some of that stuff?
Yeah, sure, Bryce. So, I mean, one of the things that John mentioned is we want to keep patients safe. And so that's why we have a regulatory process that we have to go through. And it's the process that we currently have is quite robust. And I think, and John could mention, how nimble we can be in terms of moving on something like when we have a crisis scenario like this. But, regulatory is just the one pathway, Bryce. After that, we have to get all these various health systems on board. And so in Canada, one of the challenges we have is every province manages its own health system. And so those provinces decide how they acquire new drugs, or in this case, vaccines. And so, even if we're able to get through the regulatory process through a rapid process, then the next stage is that, are the provinces going to acquire this vaccine, and how are they going to approve it and distribute it and make it available to the patients in Alberta, for example? And that's a whole other realm, which ties into the province of Alberta, the Ministry of Health, and policies that they enact. And so that's something that, when an innovator like Entos and John's team is trying to develop something, not only do they have to worry about the regulatory side of things, they also then have to worry about what the provincial regulations are like and how quickly the province would move on something like this as well.
And so would you say our system is set up for something like this? I know it's tough to say yes and no to that because this is kind of uncharted waters. But obviously we're going to be seeing some holes, and we've been seeing it all over the world in preparedness and readiness for something like this coming out. What are some of the things that we can be doing better as a province, but also, I guess, as a country, that we can make these things roll out more efficiently?
Bryce, it's a really good question that you're asking. And the honest answer is no, we're not. When we compare the health sector to other sectors in terms of the ability to adopt technology platforms, you and I have talked about this before. The health system still, to this day, depends on faxing. It's amazing. And they're talking about security around that, where faxes are printing off stuff left in unlocked rooms all over the place, all across Canada. And so, on the real challenge is that the health system is antiquated. It is built on antiquated systems, and the health system's ability to respond to crisis issues like this, almost impossible. To be honest, Bryce, even to deliver regular care on a regular basis, we're falling short. And when something like this hits, it actually cripples our system, to be honest.
Yeah, and we are seeing that not just here. We're kind of seeing that all over the world. And some of these, we've had emergency hospitals built in China, in a week to kind of take on the influx of people that have come through. I think that we've as it travels across the world, each country starts to learn from the previous country's mistakes to kind of develop a more robust flow of things. John and Arun, how has it been for you guys to work through this system right now? I know that we're getting into human trials on a lot of these processes. How has it been getting it to that stage, and how are the conversations happening to get it to where it's out into the public?
Sure, I'll start there and I'll let Arun finish it. So, I mean, there are a number of different issues sort of here. As Reg mentioned, obviously, the most important part is make sure that it's safe to use in patients. And so a lot of the regulatory systems are designed to make sure, number one, that the drug product you're making is precisely what you're making and it's pure. And number two, when you put that purified, well-made product into a patient, that there's no side effects and it's safe. That said, I mean, genetic medicines and the platforms that Entos are using are very straightforward. And I think it's a platform technology that as we bring more of these into the clinic, the regulators and physicians will become much more comfortable with how patients respond and the kinds of diseases they can address. And I think we'll see over time that the regulatory path is more streamlined. And as I mentioned, so manufacturing is a big deal. So manufacturing from the standpoint that it has to be good manufacturing, so we have to produce a pure product, but also that we have to scale up. And Arun, you can comment on Entos's efforts in that regard.
Sure. So as John was saying that the most important thing about Entos is our platform. And what has helped us in the last 4 years is that we have used this platform from like microliter to liter. And that's very important. The rate limiting step before going to clinic is whether you can manufacture what you are claiming is good at a level where you can serve like thousands and hundreds of thousands of people. And that is what I'm proud to say, that our system has been qualified and validated for the last 4 years for producing liters of actually material with the precision, with the repeatability, and we have tested it in many studies. So that is why that step before going and manufacturing, we have already collaborators, we have already the contacts, and we have already our product is already in some of the GMP facilities being tested right now. So we are in talk with big companies who are in US, and we work with them in close association. So I think having a platform is one thing which is amazing, and we have tested it. But what I want to emphasize on that, we have contacts, we have collaborations, and we have means to actually scale it up to a level where we can go to the clinic as fast as possible.
Now, what about when you talk about manufacturing? That's one thing that's come up a few times in regards to where, I mean, there's been some stats thrown out there, and I can't necessarily verify these on the spot, but there's been stats that like 80% of our drugs that are day-to-day drugs, so like heart medicine, blood pressure medicine, whatnot, they're made overseas, so in countries like China and other countries. Producing what you guys are doing here over at Entos more locally within the United States or even in Canada, where is that? Where's the realm around that where we can make it happen here so that we are more of a self-sufficient, self-sustaining system when it comes to these drugs? I'm not sure who'd want to talk to this. I mean, it could be both, Reg and John. I know you both have good insights on that particular topic.
Yeah, so I can start specifically about what Entos is doing and what we're thinking about. I'll be honest with you, 4 months ago, we weren't thinking about making 100 million vaccines for patients around the world, but now we are, and I think it goes to show that we had a team we're focused on diseases like cancer, and the COVID-19 comes up, and we have the ideal technology to be able to rapidly prototype new vaccines and then bring them to patients. So I think we've been thinking about this a lot more. Fortunately, we have this high throughput microfluidic platform that's really scalable. So we can scale all the way from making 100 doses to making 100 million doses. I make that sound simple. Obviously, there are a few steps in between. So it's going to require large partners to come in with large manufacturing capacity to be able to scale this up. But I think even in Edmonton, so we're working locally in Alberta with the Alberta Cell Manufacturing facility, cell therapy manufacturing facility. They've been great. They can produce it in clinical grade material. We can produce all the material we need for clinical trials in that facility, and then we'll be looking. So this kind of platform can be manufactured in North America easily. There are lots of companies that have that infrastructure to be able to do that. both in Alberta, Canada-wide, and through North America. And I think, as we deploy these technologies internationally, we'll be looking for manufacturing facilities outside of Canada and the US as well.
Gotcha. Reg, do you have anything to add to something, that particular topic on making these policies and looking at giving companies like Entos more opportunities to be and stay local so that, again, like I said before, we're more self-sustaining?
Yeah, so a couple of points there. The first one, let me pick up where John left off on the manufacturing side of things. One of the things that's great about this sector is the manufacturing supply chains are actually pretty strong on the vaccine side of things. And so the opportunity for a company like Entos, located here in Edmonton, to partner with companies in Europe, in Eastern Canada, and in the United States to ensure that this vaccine can be scaled up and supplied to, as John said, hundreds of millions of people. That manufacturing network is there. And the technology transfer systems to be able to do that, they're all there, and they can happen quite quickly. The real question now is, for John to be able to, and John and his team to be able to validate this very quickly here in Edmonton. Can they scale up? Do they have all the resources that they need access to? Are we removing all the roadblocks for them to be able to move forward in such a way? These are some of the questions that I don't know the answers to, and I would like to ask John, what blocks is he seeing right now? Because as a concerned citizen, when I think about me and my family, I want Entos to be moving on this as quickly as possible. And as a taxpayer, I want to make sure that I've removed any hurdles that we put in place so that John and his team can actually get this to market as quickly as possible. So question back to Arun and John on what are they seeing as some of the challenges right now in terms of moving on this opportunity?
Yeah, no, you brought up a perfect topic, Reg. And I think speaking about being a local company in Edmonton, Edmonton has incredible healthcare system. We have a great supportive system through Health City and other organizations to promote spin-off so innovators and spin-off companies to start. Really, it's at the next point. So once we've got a good technology, we know it's going to get traction in the market. To be able to build and scale that technology, we certainly have challenges in Alberta and Canada, widely to be able to do that. Access to capital is a key challenge that we've always faced in Canada in this industry that needs to be solved. We solved that by bringing money from other jurisdictions, which is fine. But I think we really need to build that infrastructure and support in Canada. From a taxpayer perspective, I would say Canada-wide, we do a pretty good job of supporting biotech industry. There's been some recent challenges in Alberta, some funds taken away for innovation in biotech that really need to be replaced, I think, because we need to make Alberta make sense for companies to start in and to thrive in, and not just because we love Alberta, but because it's the best business decision. And I think we need to do a little bit more work there. And I would just close it off by saying, one thing I love about Alberta is the sense of community. We have a lot of people who have worked in companies, solve problems. There's a really can-do attitude that I really love, and so we've certainly got a lot of support, person to person and business to business in the region, and we're very thankful for that.
With the progress that we're starting to see with different research teams around the world, do we kind of have an estimated time frame for a COVID-19 vaccine? I know that's kind of a tough question to answer, but do we kind of have a view of where our progress is on a solution for this?
I can start there. Yeah. So, the way the international scientific and business community has come together around this challenge has just been unprecedented. So we've just got an amazing amount of information that has been actionable information. We have companies that have brought forward vaccine candidates that are already in patients. So I'm really, really, enthusiastic and excited about the prospects of having some real tools to tackle this disease. As far as timelines, I think personally, I would love to see something in patients within a year. I think it's possible. I think being realistic, however, in the regulatory environment we have, I think, thinking of more to 18 months to 2 years before we have something that's widely available to the public. But I think any effort that we can make, both as individuals, as companies, and with our governments, to speed this up is going to benefit a lot of people.
How about communication? When you're dealing with, we're looking at a world scale here. Well, how's communication look for you guys when it comes to talking with other research teams on other sides of the world, or even just our neighbors, research teams in BC or in Toronto? How is that looking, and how's that been working for you guys?
That is the real good news story of this pandemic. Communication has been rapid fire and comprehensive. So we're collaborating with groups in Manitoba. We're working with a group at Dalhousie University on the East Coast. We're working with folks in BC. We're working with labs all over the U.S. And there's really an open conversation. So many researchers now are posting the results of their studies online before they're published in journals. So we have rapid access to it. There's conversations happening through, now we have ways of digitally communicating that we never had before. So I think from that perspective, it's amazing. So we've learned so much in such a short time, not only on the vaccine and therapeutic development front, but even on the ground. Do you need a mask? What's real data? What's real information? What isn't real information? I'm really enthusiastic about that. And it's brought to, some really exciting things we've learned about what current treatments or potentially have benefit in patients, because we have patients suffering from this disease right now. And I think we're making a lot of headway there too.
Yeah, Bryce, I'll make a comment. And what I'd like to do is piggyback off of something that John said, which is the level of communication, coordination, collaboration in the scientific community is something we need to be able to take broader to governments and to public policy. That's where some of these things tend to fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
Mentioned earlier about we've got different systems all across Canada. One of the things we need to do is, although Canada is a large country geographically, we're a small country population-wise. We should be able to pull together and say, okay, look, we've got this crisis. We've got an opportunity here with a Canadian company that can make a world impact. How do we get behind this company and this technology and get this product to market? Bryce, we've done this before. This is not new for Canada. We've done this with diabetes, as you know, with insulin. We've got world-renowned capabilities there. Here's another opportunity right in front of us. We've got a global crisis. We've got a local company that's got this opportunity. How do we rally around behind that, leverage all the scientific work, not that just the team here in Edmonton has done, but they're building off the scientific work around the world. How do we take that now, capitalize on it, and do something good? It would be great to be able to have a vaccine developed by Canadians, for Canadians, and for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Right? And that's how we need to look at this. This is a proud moment for us. Let's get behind this and figure out. And that's honestly why, Bryce, I'm glad you agreed for us to do this, because one of the ways of us getting this message out through Health City is making sure that those other groups realize that there is a real opportunity here that we can get behind, and let's pull our collective muscle together and make something happen.
Awesome. I know, Arun, we only hit you once there. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Oh, as a scientific lead of Entos, I must say that I'm motivated, and the whole team is motivated. And I think what is good about interviews like that, since morning I have been contacted by 5 collaborators who are actually has told me that we'll do anything to help you out to move to the next step. And this is all we want. And then, of course, there are certain things which is beyond the limit of scientists like me, and that there comes regulatory, where Reg and other people can help us out. But right now, I'm motivated to take it to the next level, bring it to a stage where we can go to the agencies and say that, look, we are ready to go to next step.
Excellent. When we look at the world right now and how different teams have addressed the issue, where would you guys kind of rank Alberta or Canada as a whole? Now, I'm kind of talking outside of like the quarantining and the self-isolation and whatnot. I'm talking more of addressing the approach to coming up with a vaccine. Where would you kind of rate us on that? Is there a comparison there?
So I'll use your question as a jumping off point to talk about our technology and compare it to the other technologies. So as I mentioned, in the vaccine space, there's sort of the traditional way of doing it, where you give an activated vaccine or an activated virus and inject that in the patient. The new way is to use DNA or RNA to get the patient to produce the proteins that they'll then protect them against future attacks from the virus. So I think there's two really main camps here, ones that are delivering RNA, and companies like Moderna, who just entered clinical trials, are using that RNA approach. We've taken a slightly different approach. We're delivering DNA because the Entos Fusogenix platform is ideally suited to delivering DNA and making sure it works properly in the body and that it's safe. So we have the opportunity, because we're using DNA, it gives us the flexibility then to add in these additional structural components of coronavirus that are going to allow us then to have more broad protection. But the other important thing is that, with regards to manufacturing and scale up, is that RNA is relatively expensive and difficult to scale up. And I think companies working in RNA are going to have that challenge. DNA, we've been making it for years. There are manufacturing facilities that are well established. We can very rapidly scale up DNA, and it's relatively inexpensive. So I think we'll be able to get a solution that works, for multiple coronaviruses, at a reasonable price to the healthcare system.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So we look at what China's done. I mean, we're seeing in Wuhan right now that their cases, I don't think they've reported any new cases right now. So is that because of the self-isolation? I know they're a few months ahead of us in regards to how this kind of spread, but is that because of the self-isolation? Are they doing something a little bit differently that, have we heard of anything that they're doing differently that we need to start taking notice to, or we have taken notice to?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as much as we all hate sitting at home and conducting all our business from home, for the most part, I think it does really make a significant impact. Obviously, this virus is transmitted through direct contact, through droplets, and reducing the chance of those contacts happening is definitely going to slow down the spread of the virus, no doubt. With regards to, so the one thing we've seen in China that's really encouraging is really, we want to try anything to save lives. So there's been, hundreds of clinical trials opened looking at repurposing of current drugs. I'll mention chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine that are now being taken up by the North American communities, potentially as prophylactic, but more excitingly, can actually intervene in the respiratory part of that disease and have improved outcomes. So they were able to rapidly test things in China and are now willing to share that information with the rest of the world. And we're taking some of those on and incorporating them. I think, looking at South Korea, for instance, that sharing of information perhaps lessen the impact and the mortality from the disease in South Korea. So I think, taking those lessons from countries that have experienced it already and found some solutions is really going to help us out as we now begin to grapple with this spread in Canada.
Mm-hmm. And I think that was kind of a missed message at the beginning of all of this, was about why we're self-isolating, and it was about, making it easier on the healthcare system, buying the professionals the time they need to do the research and development. And, with what we mentioned earlier in regards to the policies and some of the potential roadblocks that we have built into our system right now, it's going to give us an opportunity to identify those and say, okay, we need to adapt these or change them or get rid of them altogether to make sure that we are quicker and more efficient when it comes to developing what you guys are doing and what other organizations are working on, like you said, to save as many lives as possible. Good stuff.
Yeah, on that front, Bryce, another example, which is a great example, is how Taiwan managed. And they've done a great job. And one of the things that enabled them was the fact that they had an electronic medical record for every patient, and they understood what some of the travel patterns were so that they could intervene. So instead of passively having isolation measures, which we're all doing around the world, they then took it one step further to find out who is most likely a carrier and how do we intervene in a positive way to what you said, Bryce. How do we save lives? How do we intervene in a positive way? And so they were able to target the right individuals very, very quickly, isolate them, treat them, focus the healthcare dollars where they need to be focused. And they've already, so, we've talked about China, they're 3 months ahead of us, but Taiwan's already peaked the curve and they're on the downswing now. So, effective management there using the right technology background, which is not impossible. We all have the capability to do this. They've just done it better.
Yes. And you said it too, having digital records being virtual, speeds up that process, makes it a lot more targeted. We're not just throwing a fistful of darts at a target and hoping to hit the center. We're being more calculated. The more information, obviously, the more efficient and effective we are at finding the results, because we are able to target and narrow it down. So, we talk about virtual healthcare a lot. And even, if we want to take it a little bit further, we talk about virtual healthcare on getting, I have a runny nose or I had a dry cough. We can get into some of these virtual programs where you can check in virtually, see if you're okay, or see if you need to actually come in without actually having to come in and cause a log jam at the hospitals. So there's a lot of opportunities here that, that's saying it optimistically. There's a lot of opportunities here that this kind of scenario and situation is forcing us to take a look at and develop, and looking into the future, make it more streamlined. So if we wanted to look at some silver linings out of the scenario, there's some of those. It's just unfortunate that some of these things that we've already known were an issue are in the way still, when we could have had those out of the way earlier. But we are working towards that, and teams like Entos on streamlining the drug delivery system and the development of drugs and the manufacturing of drugs. Organizations like Health City in regards to creating working on those policies and opening up those silos or taking down those silos so that we can have better communication. So again, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on and joining us and sharing this information with us. It's super insightful, and I know it's going to help a lot of people in understanding kind of what's going on, what steps are being taken, and that things are being done and on a great level. So thank you again, gentlemen.
What that's called.